Counselor Accents Podcast. Two school counselors who love their jobs. Oh, and they happen to have Southern accents too. Bless their hearts.
I'm Laura Rankford.
And I am Kim Crumbly. And together we are Counselor Accents.
And Kim, your audio sounds so crystal clear today.
Well, I have this different mic that I'm using today.
It sounds really good.
Good. You know, I'm suffering from a toothache, like right now.
Well,
How's your thyroid? How's your thyroid?
We're on the road to recovery is all I can say.
Well, that's good because we couldn't even speak with one another without getting mad because of your thyroid issue and my bad tooth.
It's good to be back together.
It's good to be back together on the mend.
Yeah.
Able to talk civilly with one another.
I'm not at 100% and neither are you, but
no, but we're getting there.
We have something I'm so excited about today. This is a segment that we've been wanting to start. And everybody has a story. And I've got that sign up in my office that talks about how everybody has a story that we don't know anything about, and our story is what makes us who we are. You have a story, I have a story.
I love that. And I love to hear people's stories. I mean, I really do. I love to know what makes people tick.
So we found this guy named Quan who has, you didn't believe me. You did believe me, but you were blown away, weren't you?
I was blown away by his story.
Yeah.
I was really blown away by his story.
So I tried not to give you the details of his story because I wanted you to be surprised and just blown away. And
yeah.
Now I do want to give a disclaimer because the day that we recorded this, while we did record it at school, but it was after school. But as anyone who's listening to this knows, our day doesn't always stop just because the last bell rings. And so you were pulled in about 100 different directions, even though school was over.
Yes.
So it was kind of weird. You popped in. You weren't there at the beginning, but then you popped in. So they're going to be like, where's Kim? Why is Laura hogging the conversation? And
because you often do.
Any of our listeners know that I am not the conversation hogger.
And let me just say, I believe that you orchestrated that. I was getting false calls and orchestrated like these emergencies so you could have Quan all to yourself. But
maybe not.
Maybe not. But yeah, it is weird because I pop in there. But I've heard enough. It's just amazing. It's just an amazing, amazing story.
Yes.
So a lot of people who are saying when they hear this story, because we want to start doing these stories of people's lives, how does that tie back into education and school counselors?
Everybody has a story. And I think as you listen to Quan's story, as an educator, your mind is going to start going to you're going to start thinking about students that you have that remind you of Quan. You're also going to think of things that you could do to reach the Quans, and I'd be very interested in hearing those ideas. Where does your mind go, Kim?
Well, there is a lot that Quan learns on his own, and he begins to discover the self-discovery on his own, and I think it's a lot of wisdom for school counselors, some of the stuff that he shares. But just in going back to going to start these stories with other people, we've heard stories about how counselors became school counselors, and that story is important. We've heard, things that have happened during childhood that they grew up and educated. These are the kinds of stories that I think it brings back around the point that what we do every day with these students, sometimes we forget that they don't forget. There's only one of us, and we may have, hundreds of students that we deal with, but they're not going to forget us. Mm-hmm. And what did we do? These little people or high school students, they're going to grow up, and they're going to remember the things that we did things we said, and when I hear people's stories, I always think, who could have been the upstander there? What adult could have made a difference in their lives? And it just always serves to remind me that people are living out lives. This is their life, and if I'm in any way in contact with them, am I making that life better for them while I can? And when you hear Quan's story, it just breaks your heart to see that there were opportunities educators missed.
Yeah.
And when I hear other people's stories, and sometimes it's educators, like when we heard Reagan's story of the school counselor, and if you've not heard that podcast, it was educators who changed her life for the better after horrific trauma. So I think I'm going to enjoy doing this, and maybe there are people out there who want to share their story with us. So
yes, we love that.
Yeah.
Go to our website. Go to find us on Facebook at Counselor Accents or Instagram. And even though we may not post every day, we're there. So you can send us a message there and let us know if you want to share your story. And also, you can join us on there to be watching for upcoming announcements, even related to this episode, some things that we may want to do in the future. So go join us and enjoy Quan's story. I'm Laura Rankhorn, and Kim Crumley is missing, but that's okay. We're going to proceed without her. This is the Counselor Accents podcast, and we have an amazing guest with us today. Quan, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners, and let's just dive into your incredible story.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name's Quan Huynh. I'm the senior program manager for a nonprofit called Defy Ventures. And I'm also the author of a book called Sparrow in the Razor Wire.
So, Quan, I want you to tell us, let's start with your childhood. Tell us what your childhood was like, where you lived, and we'll start there.
Okay. I grew up in Provo, Utah. My family settled here in the United States after we lost our country after the Vietnam War. So I was probably several months old when we settled here in the United States. My younger brother and sister were also born over there in Provo, Utah, and we grew up there. Yeah, our family, of course, is Vietnamese and Roman Catholic, and Utah's predominantly white and Mormon. So I would have to say, for the most part, Utah is a beautiful place, and the people over there are very kind and loving. But I did experience what I do know to be racism now, growing up.
That is such an interesting point, and I'm really glad that you brought that out, because when I heard your story, there were so many points within your story where I felt like inclusion was missing from your life. And so, do you feel like, do you remember any examples of racism? Did anything stand out to you?
Oh yeah, I remember, like, my uncle had settled here with us, and I remember as a little boy, one time we pulled up to a gas station, and I was sitting in the back because I was too little to even sit in front. I can't remember, but some people told my uncle, like, get out of here, get out of our, go back to your country, and were saying something, and then my uncle started yelling back at them. Then he got in the car and left, and then he just told me, like, yeah, these people don't want us here in their country. I remember in school being teased, and I even remember thinking, why don't I look like all the kids around me? When I look in the mirror, you know, I'm Asian, and it's all white kids, and I just felt like I don't fit in with the kids all around me, because every kid is white. And let me see. A funny one is, I remember watching people on TV. Like, that was the time when they used to have quite a bit of kung fu movies and those martial arts movies, and you know how they dub in the voices. And I saw the way their mouths move; it didn't match up with the way the thing. So I remember being horrified, thinking that's probably what I look like when I talk, and that's why kids make fun of me. So I got in front of the mirror and I said, like, "Hello, how are you? How's your day?" And watching my mouth, I go, "It looks like it's moving normal." And it wasn't until I brought up to my father, like, "Hey, why why do those people's mouths move weird? Is that what we look like? And my dad laughs in his gentle way, and he explained to me, and so I remember that. But I think one significant incident that I do remember that stuck out to me with that really drove it home. I think my younger brother and I were playing in the streams one of the summers with our GI Joes, and we had these little rafts that we would build out of the popsicle sticks, and we put the GI Joes and let them float, and we just followed them down the streams. And some older kids and what looked like adults started yelling down at us, throwing rocks, and said, "Get out of our country! Go home, gooks!" And of course, we were I was like 8, and my brother's 6, and they looked so far away, so we told them, "Come and make us!" And they jumped the fence and they chased us down. My brother and I ran up the other side, but they caught up to us, and I had dropped some of my GI Joes. My younger brother, even though he was younger, because I was born premature, so he was always a little bit bigger than me, and he stopped to face them, and the kids had punched him and shoved him to the ground and just began shoving dirt in his mouth. And I stood there terrified. I didn't do anything to help my younger brother. We went home, and my father, who had just right around that time had also been diagnosed with leukemia, told me that you have to protect your family. How could you let this happen to your younger brother? So I had felt really ashamed of that. Damn, I let down my brother. I let down my father. How could I do this? And and then of course, my father never spoke about it again. But to me, I think that made it worse in my mind because I never got to talk about it. And so that instilled in me just this thought, yeah, I don't fit in, and I have to protect my family. And yeah, so those are some of the incidents that I remember.
Wow.
Just how growing up around that time.
That is an incredible, such an impacting moment. I can't imagine the pressure that you must have felt hearing him say that. And I appreciate how you said, he was gentle and loving, and he didn't mention it again. But even that, hey Kim, welcome.
Hey guys, I am so very, very
Kim.
sorry.
Well, you missed it.
We just got finished, so
Oh, we're done.
yeah, we're done.
Goodbye.
We are about 5 minutes in, and I'm already blown away, as I knew I would be. And I'm so excited for you to be a part of this now, because Quan is incredible. Okay.
Well, you had sent me a text and said he's incredible.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm trying.
So anyway, I was just saying that I can imagine the pressure that you must have felt, because you were the firstborn. Is that correct?
Yes, I was the firstborn.
Okay, and so that alone carries a lot of pressure, but then also hearing that segment from your dad probably put a heaviness on what you'd experienced, which was traumatic enough.
Yeah. I think my father was a military officer for the Military Academy of South Vietnam. So when he came here to the U.S., they settled in Utah only because he had traveled to the U.S. when he was still in the military before we lost our country, and he kind of knew the lay of the land. My mother had never seen snow and said, "I'd like to see snow," and that's why he selected Utah for us to live when we lost our country.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's why we settled over there. But my father he worked at the coal mines. I think his first job was as a custodian, and I think the first thing he bought was a bike to get to work quicker. But then he ended up getting a job at the nearby coal mines in Price. But then as a little boy, I also remember seeing him it was just one morning I happened to get to go with him to some neighboring cities and states to help other Vietnamese families fill out their social security, their documents, DMV paperwork. And then he created the Vietnamese Refugee Association, basically to help out Vietnamese refugees adjust to our new homeland.
Wow.
And as a little boy, though, I didn't understand. Like when he told me, like it was a Saturday morning, him and I would always get to go, which was like my day to get to spend with my father, and that's where I asked him all these millions questions, and that's where he had answered my question about those kung fu movies and the dubbing of it. But yeah, he I didn't understand why he would drive all this way and do all this, and he said he wasn't getting paid for it, and the significance of it did not register with me at the time. I was like, this is boring. Why would you do this? But I just love to accompany him.
Oh.
So because of that, though, then he became quite well known in with the government officials. So we used to have, I think, like congressmen and other like government officials come to our house, and they used to tell me as a little boy, "Hey, do you want to be just like your father when you grow up? We want you to be the first Vietnamese American to go to West Point. So you just have to graduate, and we'll put in the recommendations for you, and you'll be just like your father." So of course, you know what boy wants to be like their father,
Right.
Well, all of us want to be like our father. So that was like the everything on the context of that too. So I think when that happened with my younger brother, and then and I didn't help him, that made me feel further ashamed.
Oh. So you are very close to your dad, and I can see why. But you referenced that he was diagnosed with leukemia. Talk about that for a second. What that meant to your family.
It was terrifying. I think that's the first time I heard what cancer is. That's the first time we hear that this is not good for his health and that he might pass away. Yeah, so I mean, it's just me, my brother, and my sister. But it's funny now, like my younger sister doesn't have any memories of my father even being healthy. And these are only recently when we started talking about this. And she says the only dad that she knew was always in the hospital or already coming in and out of the hospital. She never knew my dad as this man who was giving back to the community and helping out his community. Mm-hmm.
And you also mentioned that at that time you were you're Roman Catholic, and that was a huge part of your life.
Yeah, that's a huge part of our life because we go to church, we pray, and then so of course right away my mom says, let's pray and make sure your dad is okay, and you guys have to be good kids. And so that was our belief, and you had to be good. And my father began going in and out of hospital, and so every time I pray and I go to church, and if he becomes worse, then I'm thinking maybe it's because I'm a bad kid in some way, or there's something wrong, or I'm not being a good enough kid, and God could see it. So then I think that begins this cycle in my head of I'm not measuring up, I'm not doing good enough, I'm not making my mom happy, I'm not, just I'm not a good kid. And it just, so that began from like 8 years old, 9, 10. His condition began to get worse, and that's why we moved out here to Cali. His family lived here in California, so my father wanted to be close to his family, closer to his family. He said it's time to move closer to them, I guess, because before he doesn't have much longer to live. So we moved out here to Cali, and this is the first time I went to school with Hispanics and African Americans and Asians, and suddenly it's not all white kids. And then but the lifestyle here seems so much faster, and I missed Utah in a weird sense because it was just something I was already used to. And then even out here in school, isolated incidents of, like of course kids all get along for the most part, but there's always some isolated incidents that really stick with you. And I just remember some of the Vietnamese kids out here had told me that I'm whitewashed because I couldn't speak Vietnamese and they couldn't speak English well, so I didn't feel like I fit in with them either. But that's like, as kids, oh, that's your group, that's you, but I just didn't feel like I fit in growing up.
That really stood out to me. Inclusion was an issue in Utah. Mm-hmm. And then also when you moved out to California, even though these were other people that were Vietnamese, I would have thought that it was just a natural, like, okay, inclusion. But I was very surprised to hear that they called you whitewashed.
Yeah, well, I think because like during that time, it was a lot of the refugees, the wave of boat people were fleeing Vietnam also. So a lot of them couldn't speak English. They had just barely come to the country within a year or 2 or 5 years. The other thing that also is that a lot of the families that came over later, some of them may have falsified the ages of their children, because let's say the kid is 12 or 13, they might say they're 10 or 11 so they could go back and just learn the language. So I just remember one of my first conversations with another Vietnamese kid when he asked me, like, how old are you? And I think I remember saying like, oh, I'm 11, I'm 12. No, but what's your Vietnamese age? I said, what do you mean? I'm 11 or 12. And he tells me he's 13 or 14. And when I go home and I ask my mom, like, what are they talking about? What's my Vietnamese age? And mom's like, oh no, it's just because the new wave of people coming here, their parents are just putting them back a couple grades so that they can learn more language and things like that. But then, so I think the kids were not only different in me language wise, but emotionally and physically much more mature than me already at that age. So I think that's another reason why, like, and plus I was born premature, so suddenly I'm thinking, damn, why am I so little compared to my peers? Why don't I fit in?
Mhm.
And these all played in together. I mean, it all tied in together like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. So, so you at this time were about 12 when you moved to California?
No, 10. We moved around 10,
10.
10,
Okay.
11, yeah.
And so tell us about what happened to your dad.
So my father passed away when I was 13.
13.
Yeah, it was about, so leading up to it, in the church, in the Catholic Church, we had our first communion coming up, and that was where I had believed. And I think it's funny when I talk about it with my family now. Like, we all were in denial about, like, of course, the doctors said our father's gonna die. I recently just had a conversation with my mom. It's like, hey, during that time, mom, what did you think? And she goes, yeah, the doctor said he was gonna die, but there was a part of me that was just hoping for some miracle in some way. And I think all of our miracles was going to be first communion. We're going to get to pray that day, eat the bread, and I'm gonna pray for my father to live.
Mhm.
And on the morning of my first communion, I woke up and my younger sister, peeks her head out from the shower and just says, Dad died last night.
Mm.
And I just thought, like, oh wow. And I was in shock, and I went back and just told my brother, like, Dad died, and we didn't talk about it. And even when I was exploring that and writing out my book, and just thinking like that day in particular on how bizarre it was, because my mom and my grandma hid it from us. They didn't tell us that our father was dead, and for some reason we all believed that we had to pretend that he was still alive. And we went into church and ate the bread, and we're supposed to celebrate with everybody. But I just remember thinking, how disconnected is this with the priest telling us, welcome to the family, and we're eating this bread, and we're part of this, and this is a joyous celebration. And all of us are sitting there in church knowing my father's dead, and not even talking about it. Not until after we ate the bread, we walked out. And I remember that's when my mom first said something, and then that's when I saw my little sister throwing up. Yeah. And it was like something I suppressed for years. It's like I didn't think about it. I remember, but I didn't think about how bizarre it was until I started writing, and I wrote it out, and I go, yeah, this is exactly what happened. That was the day on how we celebrated our first communion.
My goodness. And I'm sure it's one of those things where nobody knows how they would handle something like that until it happens. And have you talked to your mom about that since then?
Briefly, I think it's funny when we bring it up. Like, I think even to this day, my mom has fully grieved his death. I mean, she still wears his wedding ring. When she barely talks, she barely touches, and you can see her eyes tear up, and then she pushes it away and just doesn't talk about it anymore. So I think she read up to that chapter in my book and just put the book down so I can't read it anymore. And she's like, how can you remember all this? And my sister goes, wow, yeah, this is what happened. This is our family. That was such a weird day. And then I told mom, like, how come we didn't talk about it. Like, how come you didn't tell us? And she's like, oh, me and your grandma decided it would be better for you guys just to go to church first, and we didn't want you guys to, I guess they just, of course, they believe it's for protecting us, but I think it was just very bizarre. Like, if you talk about it now, yeah.
Yeah. And so you talk about your relationship with your mom a little bit. And so describe that dynamic to us.
Yeah, my mom's very stoic. She does not express love well. She does not say "I love you." I remember growing up as a kid, seeing my friends' moms, all of them saying "I love you," and seeing them kiss their sons. And like, I see my friends' moms kissing them, and I just remember thinking, "Damn, I wish my mom would do that." Like, I wish my mom was happy with me. She's always unhappy. She's always angry at me, or making me like saying these words that make me feel like I don't measure up. Like, my grades aren't good enough, and I have to get better grades to go to West Point, and your dad is not gonna be happy with you, and what is the neighbors going to think of you? And there's always this sense of growing up with an image or a reputation that I have to uphold for those around me.
So as I'm listening to this and I'm hearing that all of this seemed to happen, you moved to a new place around a very pivotal time in any child's life. You moved, your dad died, and there were just these problems fitting in. The school counselor part of me started thinking, oh my goodness, what are the signs that I, as a school counselor, could have looked for? How do I know that I'm not missing students like Quan in my own school? So for just a second, if we could take a break from your story, and I want you to think about what an educator could look for. If they were looking at you back then, what sort of signs could they have seen to help you?
Maybe asking about home life, or asking about us, or maybe paying even particular attention to themes in what we write about or what we share. Like, yeah, like maybe just asking like, how's your family, or maybe just understanding about family dynamics at home.
Okay.
With students, I would say. I don't know.
Well, that's really good. That's just asking, because sometimes maybe educators feel like, okay, that's your home and this is your school, and they're really not separate, because you can't concentrate on school if you've got stuff going on at home, and you definitely had significant life events going on at home. And so all of these things played into the next part of your story. You didn't really feel like you were included, but then you did find a group that included you. So why don't you explain to us that transition into the group that did include you and what happened after that?
Yeah, so after my father died, I mean, that was just right before I went into high school, my freshman year of high school, and I, I think by that time my mom is just devastated, and think she went to work full time. It's just me, my brother, my sister at home, and I'm tasked with being the one that has to take care of him. So I think by that time it's just me and my younger brother, and we just started hanging out with the kids on the streets right around the time. Like, I was fortunate to do well in school, and so I didn't have to do that much studying, and so I just get the grades I need to. Yeah, so I was saying, I think right around that time I go into high school, still not really feeling like where I fit in, but I had like some friends, and then they had some older brothers who drove cars and were already up to no good, breaking into cars and things like that. But these guys I looked up to because they seemed cool. They had, girls that hung out with them, and they were popular. So these are just kind of guys that I took to, and it just began this progression of me hanging out with these guys. And it's not like I had to study a lot, so I just like, oh, my mom just looked, okay, what's your grades? Okay, you done with your homework? Yeah, I'm done with homework. And then I could just be on the streets. So it began like, okay, I have to hide this part from mom because this is where my life is exciting, and I feel like I fit in. But I think that laid the foundation for me basically leading a double life later on. Like one part of projecting this person that is smart and educated and willing to work, but then there's another dark part of me that was involved with a very violent Vietnamese gang later on in my life.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And I really like how you put it, that you had this double life going on. So you could do fine in school, and then you had this other part. And I don't think I realized, did you say your brother was involved in this too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if that was even a connection point between you and your brother, and you felt that bond with him.
Yeah, I mean, that was like he's like my best friend growing up, and I think that first incident of something happening to him, I remember my brother would fly into rages whenever something would happen to me, or if like we later on when we went out and like somebody even comes close to wanting to fight with me or something, he was like very overprotective, and I think it just tied into that belief that was instilled in us. And I think not in a bad way from my father, but it was still instilled in us, like, protect your family, like this is what you're supposed to do. But I think we felt like, okay, we have to protect our family, and our father's looking down on us, so there's nothing I would let happen to my brother, and vice versa for him and me.
What is the dynamic of family within the Vietnamese culture? Is family very important?
Yeah, I would have to say so. Family, I think it took me being in prison, with a life sentence later, to really look back at it and think, how did my family's dynamics, like wanting, okay, like later on, just this thing of image and looking good for my family, and living up to my mom's expectations. It was never, my father passes away, I'm going into high school. It's never, hey, what do you want to do, or what interests you, or or even like as little kids, I remember there are some things I like to do. Like I said, I like to read, or I like to write, things like that. And it was like, okay, well, you're gonna read and write, but then you have to do good in school because you're gonna go to West Point, and that was just it. Or you're gonna be a doctor or attorney, you're gonna be successful, and that was it. And you have to get straight A's, and that was. So that was always this thing where I never felt like I could measure up with that. So family is important, and sometimes at the expense of our own selves or any sense of identity of ourselves. It's just meshed in,
Yeah, that's what I keep hearing in your story, is the pressure that you must have felt in every area of your life. Pressure to take care of your brother, and pressure to perform in school, and I think it's interesting that you said, kind of your path was decided. You're going to West Point, and this is what you're going to do. And I'm curious what you wanted to do. Did you ever think about what you wanted to do?
Well, I think there was always that part of me that did want to go to West Point, because I think even my father's death, me going to West Point could redeem myself in some way for him. That's what I believed. Like, okay, I could, I'll make my father proud in this way. I may have let him down a long time ago as a little kid, but I could make him proud of me. I'm just gonna go to West Point. But yet knowing, like, by the time I get into high school, our family was on welfare. My mom had to find a job, and then I had to work just to be able. Me and my brother had to work and hustle on the streets just to be able to get nice shoes like the kids at school, and to get clothes. And so I had to work, and there was no way I was doing great in school no more. It was just, okay, it wasn't that I was doing bad, but I wasn't getting straight A's, and I couldn't ask for help of anybody around me because I didn't know how to talk about it. I remember my junior year, I took my SATs, and I did terrible on it. And I think it was that around my sophomore, junior year, or even no, I think, yeah, my sophomore year, some of the kids in schools, like, they were talking about, oh, where do you want to go? What school do you want to go? And kids started sharing about where they each wanted to go. And when I said I wanted to go to West Point, my classmates or schoolmates laughed at me. Oh, wait, there's no way you're going to go to West Point, and oh, crap. So that's when I go, oh, crap, I probably won't talk about this. I won't share with anybody where I want to go, and I'll just hide that. But yet there was always a part of me that wanted to go. Then junior year, my SATs, I did awful on it. Can't remember. I just know I didn't do great. So I knew there's no way I'm going to West Point. My GPA is like 3.3. I didn't do great on these SATs. It was always just this hope for a miracle of how some, and so I filled out for the ROTC Reserve Officer Training Candidates because I figured, okay, I can't go to West Point, but I think I could still go in the military. And that would be a way for me. And I filled out that card. So they called my house, and my mom picked up the phone, and they said, "Oh, there's ROTC. You know, where." Mom's like, "No, my son's not going ROTC. He's going to West Point. Like, please don't call her again." And it's like, "Why are they calling?" And of course I couldn't tell her, "Mom, there's no way I'm going to West Point." I couldn't even share with her that I did terrible on the SAT scores, and I just knew, like, where am I going to go with my life? Like, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Oh man. You had your first arrest at age 17.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah. I was, by that time I was working at the Subway's sandwiches, the Subway store. That summer, my brother and I had run in with a local skinhead gang. Well, there was skinhead youths that were just in a continuation school nearby us. And, you know, I think it's just going back to our experiences in Utah. My brother and I always carried this chip on our shoulder when it came to skinheads and white supremacists. And so we ended up fighting with these kids all the time throughout our high school years. And so I think that summer we had a pretty big run-in with some skinheads kids, and one of my friends I think we were at a beach, and they had outnumbered us. But then one of my friends that summer had got a hold of a 22 caliber gun. It was a small gun, and he pulled it out, and I guess it terrified everybody around us, except it made us feel like very empowered. And then we beat up one of the kids that had told on my brother for a burglary. So that was the first time that I saw like what the power of a gun could do. And then basically for us, it was like everywhere we went, my friend carried that gun, and everything out of our mouths like, "Oh yeah, if something happens, we'll just shoot them up. We'll just shoot them up." And so they came to Subways to my house that night, and they said like the skinheads that we had just jumped that summer, they found our house number, and they called, and it was like my mom or my sister had picked up the phone, and those guys on the phone says, "We're coming to kill you. We're gonna come kill all you gooks, and we're coming to kill your whole family." So my brother grabs the phone, talks to them, and he finds out, okay, I know who this is. So he comes to my work and he says, "Hey, so and so just called our house, threatening to kill mom and our sister. So we're gonna try to find out where they live. Do you think you could find out?" So I had a coworker who kind of knew the same group of guys. So I asked her, "Hey, do you know where these guys live?" And she goes, "Yeah, I think so." And she drew like a map, like, "Oh, you know where this street is, and this street, this is where they live. It's an apartment up here." So it's just a very crude map. And she drew it. She gave it to me, and I gave it to my brother and my friends. I said, "Okay, here's the map, and we'll go find the house tonight, and we'll shoot them up." And they said, "Okay." So they said, "We'll be back at 10 when you get off." So 10 o'clock, I get off work. They weren't there. I went home, and my younger brother, who was 15 at the time, was laid in bed, and he was terrified. I said, "What happened?" And he goes, "You hear the helicopters?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "We found their house, and Red ran up and shot some people inside." So I guess what happened is after they left my work, they went to an arcade that we always used to hang out with. There was another kid there that knew where they lived. So that other kid jumped in the car with my brother and some of my friends. They drove over to the house, and one of my friends went up to the house, knocked on the door. When they opened it, he ran inside and shot 3 people. So fortunately, all 3 people survived, but we were arrested within 2 weeks. They arrested me for conspiracy to commit murder because I had asked for the map from my coworker, and so that was my first arrest. And we were facing 45 years to life at the time. And they charged me as an adult, and that was my first time going into juvenile hall, and then getting charged as an adult. They took me over to the juvenile section of the county jail, and then I remember on my 18th birthday, they open the door and two deputy sheriffs come down, and they were singing "Happy Birthday to You," and they sang to me. They said, "Juvie, are you ready to join the big boys upstairs?" And that was like my birthday. I remember that. They took me up to the main line, and then I learned very quickly that I believe very quickly, to not be victimized is the best way is to inflict violence on others. So I began to get indoctrinated very quickly into the gang lifestyle, the criminal lifestyle as it pertained to Asians in there and what we would do. And I would do whatever to fit in, especially these guys suddenly take me under their wings, and now I feel safer. And suddenly here's a place that I start to feel like I can fit in with people and that are finally accepting me as long as I'm doing violence on people. So I remember at 18, my very first, what they call is a mission that I go and do something on behalf of or group was attacking a man that came in for child molesting or rape or something like that. And me and several other guys attacked somebody, and then that gave me nightmares because we beat the man up so bad that he was in critical condition. And I had nightmares on it because he was beat up that bad. Like he was just laid there, and it looked like I thought he was dead. But after that, it just began like, okay, this is how violence is, and this is the way I can be recognized. This is the way I can be liked. And it became self-perpetuating because every place I went, people heard of me, and the older guys, "Oh, you're the young one they talk about." "Oh yeah," and then suddenly, "Oh look, there's this guy over there," and then I'd be, "Oh really? Here, I'll volunteer to go beat him up," and that just began this path of getting more engrossed in the criminal and gang lifestyle. I finally pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit a crime and was given 7 years in the California Youth Authority. So going into there, that's also another, they called it gladiator school at the time, where it's just a bunch of kids, basically under 25, that are still confused, and it's just wrapped up in a bunch of distorted gang values. And that's just, which I really truly believed in, and I paroled with those beliefs, and met up with guys that were locked up with me over the years, and they eventually formed the core of our gang later on. That's how it began and started.
I just think that is so important for us to talk about, because the inclusion is something that I've mentioned multiple times throughout this, and you never felt like you belonged in any group, but all of a sudden you go into prison, the very place that we as school counselors and educators try to keep people away from, but that is where you felt like you belong, like you found your group of belonging.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that was just such an eye-opener for me. Kim, you're hearing this for the first time, and I'm seeing you shake your head, and I'm seeing you respond.
What an amazing story. I too wrote the word acceptance because I kept hearing that word, and I'm just, my heart is breaking for the kid that you were. I mean, even when you said they were singing happy birthday to you, that made me so sad to think you were just really just a kid. And so Laura told me I would be blown away by your story.
So tell us more. You did find this group to belong to, and you guys had a sister gang group of females, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So something happened there. So tell us.
Yeah. So I mean, when I paroled from the California Youth Authority, then there was, of course, there's that part of me that still wants to go back to school. So I enrolled in college, but the kids, I remember some kids that were in high school with me, definitely didn't feel like I fit in with them anymore. I felt ashamed about my arrest, and I didn't know a way to talk about it. And then, and then when I'm filling out for work, I was not getting hired anywhere because I was already a convicted felon. Luckily, if we're talking about counselors, there was one amazing counselor at college my first year, who at first, like when I tested very well, and then she goes, "Where's your high school diploma? I need a record of your high school diploma." And I said, I don't have one. And she said, where is it? Like, what happened? And that's when I said, I just got out. Like, I was arrested before I graduated. And luckily, I had tested high enough so that they could put me right in to the 100 level classes on a lot of stuff. But she took a liking to me those first 2 semesters. But I was, straddling the fence with trying to go in college and then still hanging out with my friends on the streets now, because now I'm home and this is exciting to me, and this is a group that I feel like I fit in with. And so I got violated 2 more times with while on parole for like gun and gang violations. And then during one of those gun violations, it happened because I had a really good friend named Smurfette. Like she hung out with us, like our group and our gang, and it's like the older sister I never had, and she used to talk to me like, hey, you got to get out of this life. What are you doing in this? And it was on her birthday that we went to a club, then ran into some rival gang members. We ended up getting in a fight. We left and we planned, okay, these guys are going to, they knew my car, like everybody knew my car. So I knew they were going to follow my car. So I told my friends, okay, let's get the guns and get it into my car, and we'll turn down the street and let them follow my car. Everybody else take off for the freeway, and we'll just ambush them at the end of this cul-de-sac back here. So somehow Smurfette, I think she was a little bit too drunk. She didn't understand. She just knew my car, so she followed my car, and she followed us down that dead end street. And when she pulled up, I was like, "What are you doing here? Like, we're about to have a shootout with these guys." And she's like, "Where? What happened?" And I said, "Just take off." And like right when we were trying to tell her, the shooting starts at the other end. Like one of my friends had got out, but we already started shooting at each other. So we took off. Ended up going to try to rescue my friend, but we had to go pick him up. And Smurfette followed our car, and she took off. And somehow we ran out of bullets. The other gang continued to shoot with us with so many bullets. And I remember we took off and turned down a side street, and their car chased Smurfette's car, and then she crashed and died. So yeah, she crashed and died that night. So I think I really blame myself for that death, because I knew it was my car that she followed, and I knew it was my car that they were following. So after that, like I know like some of my friends, like my ex-girlfriend at the time, had said that she goes, after Smurfette's death, that's where I knew something had really clicked and changed inside you, like, because I didn't talk about things like that. And she said, like, there's something wrong with you. You need to talk to a doctor or whatever. But I just wouldn't talk about it. And I remember being in such a dark space that I went to go hunt for these guys, like basically every night that summer, looking for that gang that was responsible. But even if I didn't find them, then I found excuses to shoot at or pull my gun on other people that had looked at me wrong or was from a different gang, and I didn't care. And it was just that mindset. Like I no longer cared.
I'm finding it's hard. That's an amazing story. And so many people would not share this because these are dark places that were in your life. And I'm glad that you're sharing. But it's hard for me to wrap my head around the person that you are now.
Mm-hmm.
And that person that you're talking about that could do those things, that you get to the point that you could do those things. It's just that there's such a disconnect between who you are now and who you were then. So I'm very interested to find out. And it sounds like the death of your friend was maybe a turning point in your mind, but I'm very interested to know how this person that we're talking to today came into being.
Yeah, and I think the other part is she was buried in the same cemetery as my father.
Wow.
So I remember when I went there, and then suddenly my father's grave is there, and I don't visit my dad's grave. I go visit her grave, and because I know, like, I felt like I could not sit at my father's grave with him looking down on me and seeing what I was up to, because I just go there and just get drunk at her grave, and then, okay, now it's time to go look for these guys, and let me hope to try to find them. And that was my mindset for quite a while. And then, like I spoke, that was my second. That's how I got my next gun violations, because I had got a hold after she died. I told myself I am never going to run out of bullets again. So I got a hold of some extended high capacity clips, and I just began. Basically, for me, it was very normal to carry a handgun with enough clips to have 60 rounds on me at any given time, or in my car, and that was just how I felt like this is what I'm going to do, because I'm never going to let this happen again. And so I was violated. I think in 1996, for gun and gang violations, when we got pulled over in a car and we had so many guns and bullets inside, because we were on our way up to the mountains to test out some new guns that we got. We wanted to make sure they worked because there was a big Vietnamese festival that was coming up, and we heard that this other gang was going to be there. So we were, basically planning a massacre, which was crazy when I think about it. But that's why we were doing it, and we wanted to test out these guns. That was my mindset. I want to make sure these automatic guns work, and we're going to find this other gang, and it's going to be, we're going to wipe them out on one night. And that was our gang mentality. I get violated, ended up doing 2 years, and got out in 1998. Still not addressing any of the issues, like not talking about it. I never talked to anybody about it. So when I got out, I was just like, man, I just want something better for my life. Of course, there's that part, but then there's the other part is still the draw of the gang. I ended up getting accepted to Cal State Fullerton because I went to a couple college classes while incarcerated during that last term, and then I got a job at the Gallup organization. This is like before the fame of their StrengthsFinder studies and everything, and I actually excelled there and became their 1998 Interviewer of the Year. So they asked me, you know what? We think you would be a fantastic manager. Would you mind interviewing for this management position? So I did, but their interviews were different in that it's all personality based. So it's like, what do you think about when you drive home at night? What color do you think of when you hear this word? And all these questions that I didn't know how to answer. But then after the interview, I go, man, I can't wait. Like, finally, this is the break I've been waiting for my life. Finally, things are going to go right for once, and I could take care of my mom and have her happy, and make my father proud of me in some way. And then they came back to me about a month and a half later, and they said, we're sorry, the results have come back and you are not a fit for the position. So the words "you are not a fit," that's exactly what they said, which is just innocuous in itself. But I think just that for myself, I heard like, yeah, I don't fit, I never fit in, and just hearing that. So I did what I knew best. I didn't talk to my girlfriend at the time about it. I didn't tell my mom. I just went down to the bar, got drunk. Within a week and a half, I called up some of my friends from the gang and said, hey, let's go to the club up in Hollywood. I just want to get out. And basically, I needed to vent. And I brought a gun along with me. And I went up there. My friends ended up getting in a fight with a different gang. I was inside the club. I was not even outside when they got in a fight. But when I came out, I found out what happened, and then I orchestrated. I said, okay, who are they? Where are they at? And we just began following them, the other car on the freeway. And I basically orchestrated following them. We followed them for about 25 miles on the freeway. And that's when I told the driver of my car, okay, I don't see any other cars around us, pull up next to them. And we pulled up on the left side of them. And then I shot inside. I killed one man named Min Nguyen and injured 3 others in the car. A few months after that is, I guess through gang investigations and things like that, they found out it was our gang. They found out that it was me, and they arrested me and tried me for the death penalty. And that was in 1999.
My goodness.
How do you like in between this murder and this time when you're on the run, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? Are you hoping you get caught? Or do you have a dread? Are you scared? Going through your mind?
It's, and like I was telling Laura, like when I was writing my book and writing the process, it got me really clear, and it brought a lot of clarity to I remember going into church that Sunday after I found out somebody had died, and just thinking, okay, I should have some type of feeling when I walk in. But when I walked in, I remember feeling disgusted with the people around me, and like, why would you go to this church? Why are you praying to a God that doesn't exist? And I just left. So I was like, by that time, like very cold and calloused, and I did not care. So no, I did not want to get arrested. I just thought, okay, I've got away with it now, but I hold this like deep dark secret, and there was a part of me, like I'm ashamed, very ashamed to say, that felt, this is the ultimate stripe that I have earned. This is the ultimate recognition, and even though I don't talk about it, I know this. I'm capable of this, and this is okay. And I justified it with, this is a rival gang. They had it coming. My life or theirs, things like that. So that was the mentality I had. Like when they arrested me and tried me for the death penalty. By that time, I had already got rid of evidence. I knew they were on to our gang, so I'd already coached witnesses, and then I lied at trial, and I got away with what they had originally tried me with. Under all intents, the way they tried me, I should have been on death row or executed already. But because of me lying, and because of me getting rid of the evidence, the jury believed that I was not the shooter, and they found me guilty of second-degree murder, and I was given 15 years to life in the California prison system. Although at that time, a life sentence in the state of California was the same as a death sentence, because they had not paroled one single life-term prisoner since 1977.
Wow.
So yeah, I went into prison thinking, okay, I'm gonna die in here, and they sent me up to Pelican Bay, which was at the time notorious for sending all the high-profile gang members throughout the 90s, and so I knew where I was being sent to, and I remember my mindset was like, okay, if these are the most violent gang members in the state of California, I'm gonna show them that I belong just on this yard just as much as them, and I'm willing to do whatever to be on this yard with them too. So it was like that that warped sense of mindset that I went up there with, and I would have to say that is probably 10, 11 years of my prison sentence that I did not really even think about what I had done, or even come to grips with, crap, you killed a living, breathing human being, like what's wrong with you? So none of that even came around until about 2010. Several things happened, like right around that time, I think my niece was born, and I got to see a picture of her for the first time. It's my brother's daughter, and seeing a picture of her took me back to my childhood. She looked exactly like my brother. It was just a little girl version, and it just looked just like him. And then it made me think, like, what the hell happened to my life? What am I doing here? Like, why am I like this? And am I meant to die in here? And I think it was around the same time my grandfather had passed away. It was my father's father, which also reminded me of my dad. And then once again, like thinking, how did my life end up like this? And is this where I'm just gonna end up dying in prison? One thing that always gave me escape over the years, even outside prison, and then most especially during prison, is books. So I've always been a bookworm. So I'm known to go down rabbit holes on certain topics that I like, and I just explore, and I always look in the acknowledgement section and see who influenced their writing, and then reading those books and just seeing, so I over the years, I just get fascinated by certain topics. An example is like at Soledad, we were raising convict cichlids, so I was fascinated with raising fish in captivity, and read books about that, or articles, and so I just go down all these rabbit holes. And at Solano in 2010, around that time, I've always been interested in books on entrepreneurship and business, but somehow reading those books, I stumbled on one book or another, going down one rabbit hole or another, and stumbled on the books of the saints. And in particular, stories about saints that had failed in some way, or they had significant failures in their life, but yet they went on to build legacies. So I just became really engrossed in reading these stories about them, and just fascinated and I guess inspired in some way. And then during that time also books on mindfulness and spirituality and yeah, just a kind of way of looking at things. So it's just one day on the prison yard, I was standing at the fence, and it was early in the morning, and I just said, and I was looking around, and I said, why do I have to view prison as punishment? Why can't this be a place that I make myself a better person, even if I'm supposed to die in here? Why can't I leave a legacy for myself in here? And the answer, of course, comes back like, you can. Prison doesn't have to be punishment. And that small, subtle shift in thinking, I think, made all the difference in the world. I remember that sun was coming up over the hills, and I was feeling the warmth. In the little blades of grass, I could see the individual drops of dew. And up above me in the razor wire, I heard a sparrow chirping. And I tell everyone it had been chirping my whole prison term, but I never heard it. But that day I heard it, and I'd have to say, like, that from that day forth, prison was no longer this cold, harsh, ugly place. It became a place where I could connect with other human beings. Some of them much further along on their journey than me. Some of them perhaps not even awakened. But then it began this process for like this new thirst for knowledge for me of, you know, how can I leave a legacy? What can I get involved with? How do I do this? And that's when I first checked in with a therapist, a prison psychologist, which in prison at the time was also rare, because anyone going to see a therapist is considered weak and everything, or that's what we believe. But I just felt like, I think I have to talk to a therapist. And of course, the first thing we decide to talk about is my father and his death and how it affected me. So I would have to say it was 25 years after he died is when I began to first grieve his death. And, you know, but then removing that first stumbling block of my father's death, and then the identity pieces of myself that I built on top of it to protect myself and my feelings, and shutting myself off from the world, those also began to come down. And I go, wait, what does this say about me? Like, all these things that I've held on to these years of being a gang member and being this self-made hustler in prison and being known for this. And I realized I have no true substance as a person or a human being. I'm a fake. And, you know, that was very terrifying. But then it was also very liberating for me to realize I can go back to that broken, scared little boy and begin to rebuild myself and find myself from there. And that's where I began that process of reading books on, you know, childhood trauma and the inner child, just all these. I'm fascinated with different ways. And, you know, they say when the student's ready, the teacher appears. Like, suddenly I have all these teachers appear in the form of books, in the form of mentors around me, in the form of, you know, just lessons from the universe. So I remember I had this habit of reading about, let's say I'm reading a book on communicating effectively, or dealing with speaking in nonviolent ways, and being really fascinated with it, and then telling myself, wait, why can't I practice this? You know, why can't I use prison as this fishbowl as a practice ground? So I'd wake up every morning, and my mindset is, what does the universe have in store for me? What's the lesson I can learn about myself or the universe in some way today? And that's how I approached each day. So then each evening I could take inventory. Okay, what did I do well today? Where could I have improved? How did I fail today? And what would I like to practice tomorrow? And it just began this process of constant refinement, where suddenly 1, 2, 3 years have passed. I've got involved with different groups. I mean, I also forgot to mention, like, after my father, beginning to grieve my father's death, I saw, I go down this rabbit hole on reading and understanding the grief and loss process and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's theories and understanding like restorative justice principles and seeing all around me men that were also grieving in some way or unable to mourn their losses in some way, whether that's losing loved ones that have left them or losing children that have grown up, losing friends that they made at other prisons, then suddenly being shipped off, being denied parole multiple times at the parole board, and just the loss of their adult years, and now they're old and they realize they're going to die in prison too. And I saw it all around me, and the pain and the suffering. So I put together a syllabus and I submitted it to the prison psychologist, who loved it. And then that's when we created our first ever grief and loss group. And that's when I saw I could make a difference, and I felt that I had some sense of meaning or purpose for once in my life. Like, wow, I'm doing something for good, and then and it's for my community, and I feel alive for once. Like all these years in here, I felt like I've just been stale and just not alive, but now prison now has color, and yes, that's just how it began to open up for me in there, and suddenly I'm free and liberated. And then I get involved with other groups, and I see this is how I can make an impact in the world, and this is how I could leave my legacy here with these men, even if I'm supposed to die here. So I remember going into groups and thinking, regardless if the world never knows about what we're doing in here or anything, like I'm in some forgotten corner of the world in a little tiny prison yard, I can make an impact in my immediate surrounding to help these men, and I'm doing good in the world for once. And that's just how I approached it. Yeah.
I don't know if I want to cheer, if I want to cry. I don't know what to do with all these emotions. Kim, I've heard this, so you tell me your thoughts.
Well, it's because it's the first time I've heard it, and it's such an amazing turnaround. That's taken me by surprise. That to begin with, there are so few people I feel like ever get out of that cycle that they can find themselves in, and that you broke out of that is a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just think so few people can break out of that, and that you did, and that story of that realization of what you could be doing in your world, and whether you're in prison or wherever you are, what a great life lesson. I think wherever your space is, your place in space is, that you can make a difference in other people's lives. And I was just thinking about, that trauma that you had experienced in the past, and it was in your adult years that you began to understand what it had done to your brain, and how you could restore. And I thought about how important it is for us to teach students about, to help them with trauma-focused therapies and SEL skills while they're younger, so that they have these things in place and not have to be at an older person and look back. I can imagine the ACEs score you'd be scoring pretty high on, and because of all the past trauma. And even when you were a juvenile, you were still a kid. You were still a kid at that point. And so it was just a lot of things that I thought as a counselor we could look at your story, and it helps. You're still helping people, of course, yeah. I know, but you're helping me as a school counselor. But I'm interested. I'm just on pins and needles. I feel like it's a dateline, and how does it end? I'm on pins and needles. I mean, I see you. Obviously, you're not in prison.
Yeah.
So,
well,
what's next?
So I guess what's next is that let me see. So in the California prisons, every time somebody goes to the parole board, they're issued a parole hearing transcript, and it's verbatim, word for word, like the transcribed hearing of what happened. And for some reason in the California prison system, and I'm not sure other prison systems, but men do not share these transcripts. They don't talk about it, or if they talk about, they might just say like, it's terrible inside the parole board. They never let us go anyway. It's just a farce. We'll go in there, they go through the motions, and they ask about the crime, and they just want you to take responsibility. And even if you do, they'll never let us go. None of us are going to go home. A landmark ruling came out in 2007. It was a woman prisoner that fought it all the way to the Supreme Court, and they ruled in her favor to say like the state of California has to look into its parole hearing process, because what's the difference between a life without the possibility of parole sentence and a life with possibility of parole? Because it doesn't look like there's a difference at this time. So then they came out with these standards for what they called factors of suitability and factors of unsuitability. So somebody that's suitable is never been arrested, doesn't have violence in their prison record, doesn't have like, all these things, like basically listing out somebody that has never gotten in trouble either before or after and is taken care of. Then they had factors of unsuitability, multiple arrests, violent, continued write-ups, like everything that a factor of unsuitability, I fell into that. So even reading it, I was like, I do not qualify, and there's no way I qualify for any of this. But so we started hearing about parole, men being paroled. Most of these guys were like in their 60s and 70s, had done upwards of 30, 40 years in prison. Perfect records, never got written up, went on to get higher education, like certain things like that. Where these are like, they call them model inmates, and these were the ones that they were paroling. So we just knew like, okay, this doesn't apply to most of us, and it definitely does not apply to me. That's what I believe. But also around that time, when we're talking about like universe working, there was this book by Brian Tracy where he coined this term called the inverse paranoid, where the paranoid thinks the universe is conspiring against them, and the inverse paranoid can believe that the universe is actually conspiring to help them. And then I began to take on that mindset, like, how is the universe trying to help me? And one of my friends decides to share his parole hearing transcripts with me, like 7 of them. And I read it, and I opened it. This opened my eyes to the parole hearing process. And as I was reading it, I realized what my friend had told me what happened in there and what actually happened were 2 totally different things. And it made me also realize, like, there is this narrative or this script that we've told ourselves in our head over the years, and we just hold on to it, whether it's true or not. It's there to help cast us in a good light. And I started noticing that, and I noticed it in the language of other men around me. So of course I get interested in how language is used and how lessons of personal responsibility and choices, and I start reading books on that, and then applying. I go, where am I telling myself a narrative that is untrue, or this script in my head? And then reading that transcript, I tell my friend, like, hey, I think I know why they're not letting you go home. It's not your crime. I think I know what it is. So we sit down, and I started sitting with him and coaching him through the parole process. And then one of my other friends sits down and said, hey, what are you guys doing? Like, hey, we're preparing for the parole board. So the guys around saw what we were doing. They say, hey, what are you doing there sitting with Quan? And my friend says, Bobby says, Quan's helping me prepare for the board. And they scoffed at us. They said, how can Quan help you when Quan has never been to the parole board? Like, what? So people thought we were crazy until my friend that sat with us later went to the parole board and was found suitable. And that basically opened the floodgates of guys coming and said, can you help me? What is the secret? And for me, it's not, and I told him, I go, it's not a magical combination of words. It's this heart and mindset that I've been able to get to. And I think I was able to help my friend get there. So the guys sit with me and they think, okay, Quan's going to help me go home from the parole board. That's their motive. And my motive is, I have found this amazing freedom inside this amazing, it feels like a secret that I want to share with the world. All these men in here, because I mean, they're in such pain, and I want them to be able to come to a place where I have, like, this place of self-acceptance and this place of, self-love and just being content and peaceful with where I am at. And so that was my ulterior motive. So I'm sitting there coaching them through the lens of the parole hearing process, but then getting them to a place. So I think like over that time, those last few years, I helped like maybe 10, 12 men get found suitable for the board, which is not an insignificant amount. But there were so many more men that were inside, and like I think about like other men that were at other prisons that didn't have, you know, this. So yeah, that was just how I found my freedom. So then I go to the parole board for the first time, and I had so many write-ups leading up to it. They gave me a 5-year denial. I think in 2013 they denied me 5 years, and that was basically enough ammunition for the naysayers when they said, "See, Quan doesn't know what he's doing. If he knew what he's doing, he's gonna get found suitable." And I remember also one of my aunts who wrote a letter, and I think her letter, she was very concerned about my mental health. I guess she researched and had found out that they paroled, and it's something like less than 1% of people going to the parole board. So she was concerned about my mental health, and basically told me don't put all my expectations or eggs in one basket. But for me, it just further hurt me to think, man, even my family doesn't believe in me. And then, but I remember feeling a little bit indignant, but also understanding where they were coming from. But I told them, you know, if I did not believe in myself, whoever would? And this was like 2013 when I wrote her that letter. And luckily she kept that letter, Laura, because then I was able to include it in my book. But I basically told her, if I don't believe in myself, whoever would. It's 2013, and I guarantee I will be home before 2018. I just believe that I will be home before 2018. So I filed a petition to advance my hearing about a year and a couple months later, which also ran counter to what the belief was in prison. Guys said, "Oh, you have to wait at least 3 years." And they'll never admit it. And I put it in, and they admitted it. So that the belief was, well, they only admitted it so they could bring you back in and deny you again. So it's just always this conspiracy mindset, or this, you know, this mindset of scarcity and things like that. So 2015, I went back into the parole board. 2013, it was the very first time that I admitted on the record that I committed the murder. That I had lied at trial. I told them everything. So I think they were totally surprised at the first hearing. Second hearing, I went back in, had my hearing advanced. 2015, I went in and they said, "We find that you are no longer a threat to society." And I was paroled in November of 2015. That's how I was paroled.
That is amazing.
It is amazing. And I just think about throughout your life, you said so many times you didn't talk about this. Not just you, but your family. Y'all didn't talk about this. You didn't talk about your dad. You didn't talk about this or that or this, that. And you broke that cycle by talking about the very things that you had done, and you were very just open and sincere about, you know, you weren't hiding the fact that you had lied. And so you broke that cycle. And I think that's just so powerful.
And more importantly, Laura, that you had peace. I feel that you had peace no matter what.
Yeah.
I think you come to a place in your mind that, and I think that's important for everybody to be able to come to a peace no matter what happens. I'm good with myself, and I'm good with others, you know. What brought on this book? And I'm excited about that. I didn't know there was a book, Laura, so she told me she wanted me to be surprised. So I am surprised, and I can't wait to read this book and make my family read it.
Here?
I want to see it. Oh my
Arrow
God.
in the Razor Wire. That's the name of the book. It's written for men that are doing long or lifetime sentences, and I'm sharing with them how did I come to my own sense of inner freedom years before I paroled for my life sentence. And like I told you earlier, Laura, on the call, I wrote it, like I said, I found in my journey that during facilitating and in the groups later on that my story resonated most with those around me when I'm just sharing of my own faults and failures and vulnerabilities. So that's the way I wrote it. And that's the way, yeah.
I told him, Kim, that I've heard we lead people through our strengths and connect with people through our weaknesses. And I think that's what makes his story just so, it makes an impact because he's sharing everything. He doesn't hold back anything. And these connections that he makes with people in doing that.
And what a great ministry. I've always felt so, I can see the child that was once in these prisoners. I can see that there once was a child, and what was the changing point, or what could have changed, or what could adults have done in their lives to have kept them from getting to this point. So I'm so glad that you're offering hope and help to your fellow man in this way. So that's awesome.
And the book is on Audible too, so he'll read it to you on Audible.
Are you the reader on Audible?
Yes. I think the question for me was, is this something that I want to just put out there to say that I'm published, or is this something that I want men and women inside to still talk about 5-10 years from now, and it still be relevant for them? And that's the way I that's what kept me the fuel for me to continue to dig deeper and to further refine the message and to find my lessons so that I could share with those inside. And so I would have to say that's what really helped me.
Gosh, there's so much. Like, you talk and it's like this wisdom just pours out of your mouth. And I want to write, but I want to listen. I just don't even know.
Writing down these books and these things that he's mentioned.
Yeah.
I missed the first part of this where you guys may have talked about racism that you may have experienced. I missed all that, and I do apologize again for coming late to this because of some stuff going on. But I don't know. I want your take on what we're seeing in America right now over the last couple of weeks on the racism against the Asian community. I think this has been an eye-opener for our country that was never really, or haven't really addressed. And I missed part of probably your life, but do you have any words about what you're seeing going on?
When I have to tell you, when I saw that it happened, yes, it did trigger me. It's funny because, well, I don't want to say funny. I guess the thing is, when they talk about mass incarceration, so we're just talking like, and I hope this doesn't get political, but let's say we're talking about mass incarceration, and they talk about, how it affected the black and brown populations. We don't hear how it affected the Asians, in particular the Southeast Asians of Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia during the refugees, and when our struggles coming here to the U.S. and how those policies affected us out here in California. So I know like there's narrative of the perfect Asian, or the Asians that just do well in school. But I think there's and I think that also is a reason why, when I first came home we couldn't talk about, but there's a huge, now suddenly, I think recently it was just in the news that President Biden agreed to send back 33 Vietnamese convicted felons back to Vietnam to deport them. And some of them had grown up here in the United States, and some of them had come like in the 80s and everything. And then it began this uproar in our community where I think before nobody talked about it. And now suddenly they're saying, wait, this affects quite a bit of us, because quite a bit of our community has been arrested, but it's just always something that's been shameful and nobody talks about. And now suddenly that deportation comes up, and now suddenly Asian hate comes up, and when I saw that, I know when we created our gangs, especially in prison, because we're outnumbered, drastically outnumbered. So Asian, when we created our gangs or our groups in prison, was to protect ourselves. The irony is we did it protect ourselves in our community, but we ended up preying on ourselves in our community. And I wish, like, when I saw that, and I thought about my friends that are still inside, or the ones that have passed on, or the ones that are on death row, and I wish we had used that passion for our community or our gang, and really helped our other community and been like the right politicians or the right types of people to give back. Unfortunately, we wasted a lot of our talents in the gang lifestyle, and yeah, so it's not new to me. I mean, Asian hate. I mean, if we want to trace, I mean, there's quite a bit. You know, the internment of the Japanese, the Chinese and the railroads, just the portrayal of Asians in entertainment and the media, or the lack of Asians in entertainment. So there's quite a bit, but I don't know. That's I know it's totally off base, and that becomes more a politicized thing. So that's why. But I think we're just having a conversation. I'm just talking my thoughts on that.
I hear you, and I appreciate it. Part of our job is especially school counselors, make sure there's equity. Equity.
Equity.
Equity. It was here. It's just. It was.
I think she was mixing between equity and equitable, huh? But you didn't know which one to say.
That's it. That's what I was trying to do. I'm like, what?
We're on the same link, Kim. See.
Thank you. You knew exactly what I was trying to do there. I'm like, which way am I going to go with this? But it's important because some of that, I don't think that we often think about our Asian students as being an issue with being equitable. And so when this came about, I think it was an eye opener. We have to really look and say, what really are our beliefs? What are we saying, and how are we? So.
Yeah, my it's funny. My aunt, the one that wrote me that letter back in 2013, she's always been like the consummate researcher. If I'm the consummate bookworm, she's the consummate researcher. And she sent an article out a few weeks ago talking about, like, there's some study where they talk about something about Asians and what is it? Median wage earnings of a Asian woman making more than white women, and like that. She was sending this and sharing with family, and I go, wait, this study. When they lump us into Asians, now you're throwing in these wealthy Malaysians and Chinese into it, and that skews everything else. I go, show studies that show, and I only brought this up because I couldn't find it anywhere in my Asian American Studies class, stuff on Southeast Asian refugees, and see that disparity, because I know there's some studies when I saw the poverty levels of the refugees were even lower than that of blacks and browns in the United States when they came here, and so I go, I say this not to put a damper on what my aunt shared, but I say this to say this is even more reason for us to be proud of what our communities have built here. But I think we have to realize, like, and I think the mainstream media has to realize, like, yeah, we don't come from money, and we came here with nothing, and we had to build something. So
yeah, that's impressive. Laura, you were right. I am blown away.
I told you. I knew you would be.
I am. I am very much. I am inspired, and it just makes me want to be a better school counselor. And I think your story is going to resonate with so many people. It's unique. Believe me, that story is unique. But there's that humanity in it that I think will resonate. And like you said, everybody's in some kind of prison, something that to find that peace. So gosh, thank you so much for being on here. Thank you, Laura.
You are welcome. And Quan, if they want to find your book, where can they go to? We'll put a link in our show notes so that they can order your book. And I asked you if you would be willing to go speak at schools, and you said yes.
Yes, if I think I could bring value to them, I think I'm open to it. Yeah.
Oh, you can bring value. I assure you, you can bring value. This story is valuable. So we'll put.
You can find my book on by going. Of course, you could go to Amazon and Audible, but I know there's a big movement of people not wanting to support Amazon or Audible or whatever, and they could buy it directly from me, which does give me more. royalties compared, but that's not what it's about. It's for me. Is they can find it on my website at quanxhuyn.com, but it's hard for people to spell it, so they could also find it at sparrowintherazorwire.com. I bought both of those domain names.
Okay. All right. And so I guess that's how they can get in contact with you as well.
Yeah, it's on all social media. It's Quan X Huynh, so QUAN X and then HUYNH. All social media, same thing too.
Well, I can't thank you enough for being with us. This story, I will remember this story forever. And I'm so proud of you and what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just huge. You're changing lives. And thank you for what you're doing.
We love good story. We love a good news story, and this ended up through all that pain for there to be squeezed out good and helping others find good. Thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome. I mean, if you think counselors in schools want to support my mission, because my mission now is to help bring every single one of to bring my book into every single prison in the United States, so they could help me in that process, then reach out and I could let them know how we could do it.
Yes.
That sounds great.
I love that.